There are plenty of videos all about the different tools and services that you can use to play tabletop RPGs online, but personally the ones that I find the most useful are the ones where someone just tells me how they do it instead of, giving me all the available options. Like, here's one way to do this thing. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through the tools I use and what I use them for to play tabletop RPGs online. We are going to be talking about D&D 5th edition more than anything else, simply because I currently have a few D&D games ongoing, so I've been focusing on that a lot, but I will touch on some of the other systems as well. Oh, and welcome to Polyhedron, I'm Ron. And at the end of the video, we'll also break down how much I pay for all this stuff. So if you are gonna do things the same way that I choose to do them, what's it going to cost you? So for communication, I use Zoom and Discord. Discord is just for us to have a place to chat in between sessions, answer questions, schedule stuff, and post all the relevant links. I personally don't like using Discord for voice chat, though it does have the huge benefit of being free. While we're on the session itself, I use Zoom. I have a pro account from work, so I honestly just use that. It usually works pretty well, but like any video chat, eventually you are going to run into some problems. For simpler games where we don't need all the cool stuff that a virtual tabletop gives you, sometimes I would just share my screen to show a map or something and use Google Dice Roller to roll dice. In some situations, less is more, but usually I do use a virtual tabletop. My virtual tabletop of choice is Foundry. I made another video about why if you want to check it out, but in short, I find it a lot of fun to use and really easy to customize with all the modules you can install, one of which lets me leverage D&D Beyond purchases, which I'll get to a bit later in this video, and it has just one of the best communities that I've come across online. But keep in mind that I'm talking from the DM's perspective. When you're a player, you don't necessarily have to worry about which VTT you're going to use. Just use whatever your DM is comfortable with, because odds are they're paying for it, so you don't have to. Foundry is an application you can either install locally or have it hosted somewhere. I recommend having it hosted because it'll work better when players log into the game from their browsers at home. The easiest way to host Foundry is to use a service called The Forge, which is a service that lets you pop in your Foundry license that you purchased and create your own managed Foundry VTT server. I've tried both The Forge and hosting it myself on Amazon Web Services, and I found that it'll cost you just about the same, but on The Forge, you'll get better performance and just generally less things to manage and worry about. So it's more like seamless and easy. We'll get back to the virtual tabletop part of it in a bit. Specifically for D&D, for character creation and keeping track of all my content and rules and everything, I use D&D Beyond. I really like D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is not a virtual tabletop. It's mostly a place to buy and manage and consume all of your D&D content, but it does offer some really cool options like creating characters, encounters, sharing your source books and adventures with your players, and just having, a very easy to navigate system for looking up spells and rules and monsters or anything else. I currently have 2 D&D games running. For one of them, I use a virtual tabletop, Foundry in my case, and for the other one, I don't. We use D&D Beyond for character sheets, which do let you roll dice right from the character sheet itself, which is cool, and all the combat and everything we do in the theater of the mind. For my other game, we do make more use of maps and tokens and all the cool stuff that you get with a VTT. My point is, there are lots of ways to play and you don't need any of these tools to play. I'm just walking you through how I do. Now, I do like to use D&D Beyond for character creation, even if I am running the game on Foundry. One of the main reasons I like Foundry so much, as I mentioned earlier, is that you can extend it and customize it with modules, one of which, by VTT Assets, lets you import stuff from D&D Beyond right into Foundry. And there's also a Chrome extension called Beyond 20 that lets you roll dice right into either Foundry or Roll20 from your D&D Beyond character sheet. So if you want, you can just use the character sheet in D&D Beyond. I personally don't like to ask my players to have multiple tools open every time we play. I want to make it as easy for them as possible. So we do the initial character creation in D&D Beyond, and then I typically use the import tool to bring over the characters into Foundry. I do that for my players. You can also use it to import full adventures, which is cool, because then, unlike Fantasy Grounds or Roll20, you can leverage the purchases that you've made on D&D Beyond instead of buying it on both platforms if you, like me, like having D&D Beyond as your centralized source of D&D content. Okay, so we said Zoom and Discord for communication, D&D Beyond for character creation and general D&D content management, and Foundry hosted on the Forge as my virtual tabletop. What about other games? Games that are not D&D? Well, depends on the game. I'm a big fan of Ironsworn. I made a video about it if you want to check it out. And that game, for example, at least the way I like to play it, doesn't really need any maps or dynamic lighting or anything fancy. All you need is your character sheet and some dice. Roll20 does have a pretty cool automated Ironsworn character sheet, so I do use that sometimes. It's well within the free tier of Roll20, and both Foundry and Roll20 support lots of other systems. My point here is that you don't have to tie yourself into a single tool. If you're paying for a tool, then that should definitely be your default because you probably like it more than the other tools, and you do need to get your money's worth. But it's fine to use the right tool for the job, especially if you can do it for free. So how much does all of this cost me? Let's break it down. But first, once again, remember that online or not, it's always going to be more expensive to run the game than to just play the game. So if you're an aspiring game master, just know what you're getting into. If you're more interested in being a player in a game, odds are that all of this is going to be a whole lot cheaper for you. Okay, so Discord is free. Zoom is $15 a month. Personally, I do have an account from work and I use that and I don't pay for it. If I didn't have it, I would not buy it. I would probably just use Skype or Google Hangouts for free. I pay about $5 a month for D&D Beyond. You don't need the subscription to play or create characters. The subscription just lets you share content with other players and create as many characters as you want, and that's pretty much it. You still have to purchase source books and adventures if you want to. I paid $50 for the Foundry VTT software, and I pay another $5 a month to host it on the Forge. Again, you don't have to. You can even just run the application on your own computer, but odds are that if you do that, it'll be a little slow if you have like a big international group of players. Those are the core things I use. On top of that, I do support both Foundry and VTT assets on Patreon for $5 a month each. Of course, completely optional and not required. I support Foundry simply because I like what the developer is doing and I really want him to be successful enough to make it even better than it is. And I support Sebastian from VTT Assets for the same reason and because being a patron does give me the ability to import full adventures using the D&D Beyond import tool right into Foundry, which is magic. It's magic how well it works. And also it lets you grab non-SRD monsters, which is cool. The free tier lets you import characters, which honestly is amazing value as well. And I'm not including any other purchases that I choose to make outside of like the monthly fees, like rule books for the various games or adventures or stuff like that. Those things all depend on the type of game you're running. So $5 for D&D Beyond, $5 for the Forge, so $10 for the core tools, and another $10 for the folks I choose to support on Patreon. Again, if I didn't have Zoom from work, I would use a free alternative. It's not that much better than Skype or Hangouts to be worth $15 in my mind. And of course, I did purchase the Foundry software for $50. My advice if you're getting into DMing online is to take it slow. Don't buy a bunch of things at once. Buy only what you need to do the things you want. Plenty of people online will tell you that you absolutely need something or other and you have to buy it, and what they actually mean is that they need it and they want to buy it. So they assume that you have to as well. Odds are that you don't. Start with something basic and cheap, see if it meets your needs, and just, progress from there as your needs expand, as you become more well-versed in the vast world of online DMing. Personally, I started with Roll20 and I still use that for Ironsworn here and there. And there were a few things that I didn't like about it so much, so I did some research and I ended up finding Foundry and liking it a lot, so I started using that. Eventually I found that D&D Beyond import module that I talked about. My point is that you don't need to make all these purchases outright. Add something when you need it. It's really easy to get carried away with all this stuff because all of it is so damn cool. Anyway, I hope that this is useful for you, and if you like talking about this kind of stuff, subscribe to the channel. But for now, just go play a game.